So what we're speaking about now is called dowsing. People often also refer to it as divining or divination. So if you think about the word divine, it's the spiritual source, right? So we're communicating with or connecting to a spiritual source to get this information. So it's an intuitive type of process. And you'll often see people use some type of a tool for dowsing, such as a pendulum. This is a pendulum here this one has a crystal on it, but it doesn't have to be a fancy pendulum like this. So really anything that has a string or a chain with an evenly weighted object at the bottom could serve as a pendulum. And what you're doing is you're forming a question with your conscious mind. So it could be a simple yes or no question. So you could ask, is it going to rain here today? And you could get a yes or no answer to that type of question. In healing work, we often ask about things like the chakras, about the aura, about whether some type of therapeutic intervention would be like beneficial or not beneficial. You could ask about foods or supplements or medicines, if they're going to be beneficial or not for a person. Now, it's very important to be precise and clear when you form a question. So let's use the example of asking about if a food is going to be beneficial for you. So I could say, is it beneficial for me to eat a banana? Now with that question, I'm not specifying how many bananas, I'm not specifying at what time I'm going to eat the banana. It's like a very general question where it's not specific enough to ensure a really valid answer, because I might be able to eat, let's say, one banana, and that's good for me. But if I ate 5 bananas right now, I would get sick. Or it might be today, it's good for my body, that's got something my body needs today. But another day, it might be my body doesn't want any more sweet fruit, and it wouldn't be good. So the way we form a question can make a big difference in whether our answer is going to be valid or not. So it's always good to keep that in mind when we're doing dowsing or divining, that it depends on the quality and clarity of our question. We also want to have, in a sense, permission to ask a question. So when you start out, you could ask, may I, can I, and should I ask this question? Sometimes people get a little bit kind of carried away with it, where it gets kind of like ego-focused, where your mind wants to know things that you should be able to just like live your life and not have to ask the divine about it. So we can be mindful to not overuse dowsing, to use it in certain contexts where we really need to get some additional spiritual input, but not to use that as a substitute for using our own judgment, our own mental abilities and all that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I mentioned we could use a pendulum with dowsing. What this is really doing is it's giving an external representation of the answer to your question. The way the answer is coming through is actually that your own spiritual source, your own energetic self, that's beyond the conscious mind, is causing your body, your muscle to move in a way that makes this move to give you the answer or response to the question. So you're kind of creating this language to communicate with your higher self. So if it's a yes or no question, your language would just be, there's a movement of the pendulum that represents yes, and a different movement that represents no. You also might have a third movement or position that represents maybe or not sure or can't answer this. So there's like a yes, no, maybe kind of language there. You can just ask it to show you what your yes and no are, or you could intentionally program it. So what I usually do is I just check in and ask, show me my yes, and then I just go into like a relaxed meditative state. So my conscious mind is out of the way, and the higher consciousness takes over to make my body cause this to move to give the answer. So let's do that and see what it does. So it's going in a vertical up and down motion. So for now that would be my yes. And then to double check I would do the same asking for a no. So I ask it to show me the no, and then I relax again. Now it's going sideways. So that would be my yes and no. Now that's not universal. So a different person might have a different movement for yes and no. And even for myself, I might do this on a different day and I could have something different to represent the yes and no. So you could check in each time you do this if you want, just to confirm that you have your same yes and no before you start asking other questions. So once I've established that language there, that yes and no, then I could apply this to different types of questions. So I might first test it out with questions where I already know what the answer should be. So I could ask right now, am I wearing shoes right now? So this is something that you kind of have to practice to get into that shift where your conscious mind lets go and you just allow the answer to come through. So this is kind of like a beginner exercise that would be used for psychic development. So just to kind of train your mind to make that shift, like from left brain to right brain kind of, where you're not thinking, you're not controlling, you're just letting go and allowing it to come through. So that's the art of dowsing in a sense, is to be able to get a clear question first from the mental side and then let go, let the mind get out of the way so that the intuitive, the spiritual part can deliver the information. Besides pendulums, you may see other types of tools like rods, dowsing rods that will swing back and forth or up and down. There's something called a bobber. It's like a spring. It can kind of spring up and down or sideways. And of course your own body is a dowsing tool. It's actually the foundation of all these other tools, because these don't move unless your muscle's moving it. So if you see someone do the arm test, where they hold their arm out like that, and then they put pressure, and either it will stay strong or it will go weak, that could be used as a form of dowsing. That's kinesiology. They're often using it in a more direct way, where they're exposing you to something that would either make you stronger or weaker. So let's say you have someone say you're wonderful, I love you, and then you touch the person's energy that hears that, probably it's going to make them stronger.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because it like energizes them, they feel better, right? So that could help their arm strength be stronger. And then if you tested someone saying something negative to that person, like, you messed up, why'd you do that? What's wrong with you? That'll make the arm go weak.
Wow. That's cool.
So at dowsing, you're using the same like energy muscle principle, but you're using it with this language of yes or no, or true or false, or strong or weak, depending on what you're doing.
And how would you like clear it if you use it a lot? How would you do you cleanse it or?
If you're using a pendulum, especially if it has a crystal on it, it kind of like picks up energy.
Yeah.
So the same way you would clear the energy of anything, you could use certain types of crystals for clearing, like selenite. You could use the it's a dark colored stone. It's called shungite. That one is like really good for grounding also, but it's also good for clearing things energetically. You could use sunlight, moonlight. You could use salt water. There's different ways of clearing energy. Some people like to use sage for clearing. Whatever you find works well for you. There isn't just one universal method. People find their own way of doing it. And with Reiki, you can also use Reiki energy to clear crystals or other objects.
Wow. That's awesome.
So any questions so far about the basics of how dowsing or divination work? So in a Reiki treatment, it's commonly used to work with the chakras. You can use it to sort of diagnose what's going on with the chakras. So you can ask to show how the energy is moving for each of the chakras. People think of it in terms of a chakra being open or closed, which is not a simple yes and no or black and white kind of thing. They could be more clear and open or less clear and open. So the chakra could be like very constricted, or it could be very open and spinning very widely and smoothly.
So you would do it on an individual, or would you ask about the individual's chakra?
Okay, so if you're doing it in a Reiki treatment, if the person is sitting or lying down, you could, if you're working with a pendulum, hold the pendulum in front of or over each of those energy centers. So you could actually put it in front of the chakra, and then as it's in front of that chakra, you're asking that question. You're asking, how is the energy of this particular chakra? Now you don't have to actually place the pendulum over the chakra to ask. So it doesn't have to physically be there. When you're putting it physically in front of the chakra, that's more of like a mental aid, like it's helping you focus your intention on that question about that chakra. But you could form that question and intention even if you're on the phone with someone who's in another country. You're mentally asking this question. Sometimes they refer to this type of dowsing as mental dowsing, because you're forming the question in your mind and then letting the spiritual source give the answer. There's other types of dowsing that are different. They're referred to as radiesthesia, and that has to do with like the energy that something radiates and how that affects your energy. Water dowsing, where people, they're looking for water underground, that's more of a radiesthesia type of dowsing, because what's happening there is the current of water under the ground is actually affecting the energy field there in that spot. So when the person is walking along there and they're holding their tree branch or dowsing rods or whatever instrument they're using, when their own body goes over that spot, it causes a shift in their energy, which leads to that instrument then moving. So that's how they're detecting water there. So they don't have to mentally ask the question, is there water? They're just kind of feeling it through the energy itself. But with this, we're usually just asking it mentally, and then the spiritual source is giving the information. So you wouldn't have to have the pendulum right over the chakra, but by having it there, that does help you as the practitioner keep your mental focus on that area and that question. So then you would kind of have a language of what the movement of the pendulum represents. So you might have it move a certain way to represent the chakra is very clear and the energy is flowing smoothly there. So for me, that would usually be spinning clockwise in a wide spin, like that. So that would mean the chakra I'm focused on is really pretty clear and strong. And then if there's a chakra that's kind of stuck and weak, then it might be just stagnant there, just kind of moving a little bit, not spinning too much, just like a little bit of motion. For some people, they have the up and down and back and forth to represent how the chakra is functioning. And there's also the possibility of a chakra spinning in reverse. So in that case, if you're using that as part of the language of communication, then reverse could be the spin direction is reversed. So you might have one direction representing the normal spin, and then the reverse or counterclockwise would be the reverse spin of the chakra. So that's kind of the basics of using dowsing with the chakras. There are some practitioners who like to do before and after, where before they even start doing the treatment, they'll take their pendulum and they'll go and check on each chakra, and they'll maybe write down what they found for each one. Then they'll do the treatment, and then after they've done the treatment, they'll check again to see if things changed, if something that was stuck cleared up. One other possibility when you're doing the chakra dowsing is to actually use your pendulum to focus energy on the chakra to work on clearing it. So like combining the crystal and the pendulum with your Reiki treatment with your hand. So like you might use that to help focus energy in that area that needs to clear. And so there you could even allow the pendulum to show you kind of like in vivo, live, as it's happening, how the chakra is clearing. So you might be over a chakra and it's kind of stuck, like it's not moving much. And then as you work there, you'll see the pendulum will start to swing more.
So it's clearing it.
So it's clearing it. So that's another way to use it.
You can do both with your hand.
Right, you can work with your hand and with the crystal. So I want to let you practice a little bit now. And you want it to feel kind of like comfortable in your arm. So you don't want to feel like your muscles getting tight as you're holding it. So whatever position allows it to be comfortable as you're holding it.
It's so beautiful. Okay. Show me my yes.
happening, right?
Yeah, it's very faint, but it's
Right, not everyone is going to have like the same level of movement as they do this. For some people it's kind of a slight motion, for other people it's a wider motion.
Wow. Can I ask a question?
Right, you can try with a question now.
Am I on the right path?
Do you want to hear a comment about that question?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a little bit of a vague question. I'll explain why.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, the way you stated it, am I on the right path? That applies or assumes that there is just like one right path.
Yeah, right. So should I maybe say
So think of what you want to ask about the path that you're on or that you're choosing to go forward with. What would be the question?
Am I on the right spiritual path? Says yes. Would I be more specific in that question? Maybe more specific?
With that question that you just used, my own way of phrasing it would be, am I on a spiritual path right now that's beneficial for my growth?
Oh my god, that was great. Oh yeah. Am I on the right path spiritually that is beneficial for my growth? Well, you worded it so great. You have to be specific, very.
Mm-hmm.
Am I with the right partner in my life that is going to help me to evolve? Should I have asked it different? Did I ask it good?
Well, the question was okay in one sense, but not relevant in another sense. And here's my way of looking at it.
Yes, yes.
Whoever we're with in our life at any time in some way is serving our evolution. So there isn't really a no or negative answer to that if you look at it from that higher perspective. It's more of our like human dualistic, like is this good or bad, right or wrong, way of looking at it that's forming that question. So the spiritual source might look at everything as serving your growth in some way. So I probably wouldn't even try to ask that type of a question.
I don't know what else to say.
You don't have to do any other questions right now.
That's so beautiful. Oh, it's very powerful.
Mm-hmm. It's a very useful tool.
Can you use it frequently, or would you recommend only when you have like a serious question?
Ideally, you don't want to overuse it.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, just to kind of test it out and gain confidence in your skill with it, it's okay to do it with a lot of different types of questions. But then as you're used to doing it, then you'll probably want to step back and just apply it when it's really necessary and not use it for very mundane questions where it's not really suitable.
Yeah. I completely agree. That sounds so.
Any other questions you have about working with dowsing or other dowsing tools or any of that at the moment.
So does it matter if it's like made of copper, or you said the material doesn't necessarily matter because we're like the dowser, right? Or how do you feel
Right,
about
your body is the foundation of the dowsing tool in a sense.
Yeah.
Especially for what I called mental dowsing, where you're asking a question and the spiritual source is coming through with the answer. The particular materials don't really matter too much. But in terms of energy conduction and things like that, there can be differences in what the pendulum or the instrument's composed of. Something like copper, like that's a metal that conducts electricity, so that kind of like helps energy come through more.
Oh wow.
Different crystals have different properties.
Mhm.
So if you're using it with healing work, you might be more conscious about which type of crystal you want to work with. And then also if you're connecting with different energies in your environment as you're using it, like to ask or douse about different things in your surroundings, then the actual material of the item at the base of your pendulum could make a difference. There are some pendulums that have all the different stones for the chakras, and so with that it's designed where you could use the pendulum to focus on those different chakras based on the different stones. So like it's a tool to help you even more with your ability to resonate with the different energy centers. It's like specifically designed for working with chakras. So different crystals could be for working with different energy issues, different things like that.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like magic. And can anyone use it, or should we not share them, or
I would recommend, if you have a pendulum, that be just your pendulum that you're working with.
Yeah.
So to not have lots of different people like imprinting their energy on the objects you work with. It's possible to do that and it would still work, but it's better to keep it clear and just connecting with your energy as you work with it.
Okay.
So that's the way I recommend you do that. With other objects that you use in a spiritual context, it's kind of like you're making your own energetic connection with them.
Yeah.
So it's better to have it as your personal tool rather than like the collective tool that anyone could use.
Completely. Yeah, that's